Hi, this is David Douglas, Managing Director of EBO, the digital agency. EBO are the proud sponsors this year of RadioMoLI and MoLI's digital programme.
Díogríomh go léir. You're very welcome to MoLI. My name is Simon O'Connor. I'm the director here at the museum, and we're delighted to be hosting this evening's lecture by Aedín Ní Thiarnaigh. And we'd like to thank Aedín and our friends in the Folklore of Ireland Society for bringing this event to the museum. Back in February 2019, about 6 months before we opened here, we launched a radio station for the museum, which was inventively called RadioMoLI. And that launch in this building featured a number of young folk musicians, folklorists, and spoken word artists. And it was a small, I suppose, statement of intent for us as our first little piece of public programming, that we wouldn't simply be a museum of literature that focused on well-known literary giants. It was important for us that we would seem to be a welcome space for folk as well as book lore, for the oral tradition, for the spoken word, and for the sung story. And not just actually in the English language. Of course, my colleague, Professor Margaret Kelleher, who's the Chair of Anglo-Irish Literature and Drama at UCD, enjoys telling the story of the exhibition design company who worked on the museum in the early days, asking us what our key assets were for display. And Margaret's response was 1,500 years of storytelling in 2 or more languages. We recently presented an exhibition on Peg Sayers and the Blasket storytelling tradition in collaboration with the National Folklore Collection in UCD. I'm delighted actually to see Christor here this evening, and Anna, who's retired but who worked with us on that as well. The exhibition is still running below, in the room below us here, for the next few weeks. It finishes up just at the end of February, so we switched it on this evening actually, so you could have a look, but do try and catch a glance of it on your way out. The text of the exhibition was very kindly written by Eilish Ní Thiarnaigh and explored not just Peg, of course, but the work of folklorists from home and abroad in protecting and progressing that legacy over the years. And it struck me during the research period for that exhibition how much of that activity was taking place both in and proximate to these buildings here. So I hope that with the establishment of MoLI, that folklore activities once again have a friendly home on St Stephen's Green. A little housekeeping just before we start off, if you wouldn't mind turning off the old mobile phones. We have a 25% off our membership for all attendees to the event this evening. So you can buy that either at the front desk if you're interested, or at moli.ie if you use the promo code INIS. INIS, and you can get 25% off memberships. After the lecture, we'd be delighted if you could join us for a drink in the saloon behind us. That sounds a lot less elegant than it actually is, but do join us afterwards. And in the meantime, please join me now in welcoming the President of the Folklore of Ireland Society, Eilish Ní Thiarnaigh. Thank you.
So, gur míle maith Simon, agus fáilte geala roimhar fad chuig an leach seo, céad leach de bliana 2023. Fearmid fáilte ribh an airach leis an caint agus an cur láthair faoin éile bríide Inis Meáin ó Aedín Ní Thiarnaigh. Agus buchas ó Creed Simon O'Connor agus a cholachaí Benedict Schlepper Connolly agus an Éireann ar fad MoLI a chur an onad úntaach seo fáil dúin anocht agus gachrad eile. St Brigid's Day, as you know, is a day of new beginnings, the end of winter, the beginning of spring, the season of growth starting, and a lot of the traditions associated with St Brigid, with Brigid's Day are, about blessing the crops, blessing the cows so they'll give more milk, ensuring fecundity and flourish for the season that's just starting. So it's very appropriate that we are having our lecture today because it's an important day for the Folklore of Ireland Society. It is a beginning. It's actually our first live lecture in 3 years I can hardly believe that. From the start of the pandemic until now, we have been online only with our lectures. So from now on, we'll have live lectures. We'll continue some of the Zoom ones because there are benefits to that as well. But it's really fabulous to, to be having a real live lecture in a beautiful place. And it's historical for another reason, as Simon alluded to. For decades, I don't think from 1927, when the Folklore of Ireland Society was founded in January of 1927, this is the time of year it all started. I don't think they met in Newman House on Monday nights from the very beginning, but they have for decades and decades and decades done that. Certainly when I started coming to Folklore of Ireland Society lectures in the 1970s, right through the 70s and 80s, the lectures were always here in one of these big rooms. Well, they didn't look as grand then. They were kind of a little bit more, there are other people here who remember that, but they were pretty grand enough, the high-ceilinged rooms. But since the 90s, I think the Society has been meeting out in Belfield, and in recent years, before the Zoom, in the National Library of Ireland. But it feels like a homecoming to be back here in Newman House, MoLI, as it now is, for tonight's lecture. So Gura Míle Maith, Benedict, Simon, and so on, and everyone for making this possible. And yeah, it would be great if, as Simon said, we could keep up the connection with this side of Stephen's Green, where, of course, 84 was the commission, the Irish Folklore Commission, right next door. So tonight's speaker is Aedín Ní Thiarnaigh. Aedín is a writer and broadcaster and sometime lecturer and teacher. You'll know her, I think, from the fabulous RTE series of last year, Fave Law, where she explored Ireland's nature and folklore and biodiversity around the country. Aedín was born in Enniscorthy. She has a first-class BA in Gaeilge from the University of Limerick and a first-class MA in Irish Folklore Studies from University College Dublin, where, in fact, I had the pleasure of, giving some seminars to her and her classmates, a couple of seminars for the MA in not so long ago, actually. 2021. Like a lot of graduates in folklore studies, I think Aedín is quite adventurous, and she lives on, even though she's from Enniscorthy, she's now living on Inis Meáin, and has been doing so for a few years. And she's carried out extensive research in Inis Meáin on the celebration of Brídeog, St Brigid's Day there. So I give you Aedín Ní Thiarnaigh.
Díobh go léir, Cachai bhfuil sibh, gur míle maith éiles as an bháilte de sin. Gur míle maith as a híocht the nacht agus bháil an freisin buchas a gáil le muintir MoLI agus le Simon as áit all in a chur fáilchain agus go éiles agus an Cumann le Béaloideas as chuir a thuirtchum a heachtainse a nacht. And fáilte gur míle maith go léir freisin as a heachtamach a nacht. And thank you all so much for being here, and bums on seats are such a joy to see, as Eilish said, after a few years of not having anything like it. So, as per my introduction, my name is Aedín Ní Thiarnaigh. We'll start our lecture tonight, as I have done in Irish. I will deliver the lecture through English. However, I have left my source material as Gaeilge mar an tráchtas a rinne mé my thesis on Inis Meáin, and all my fieldwork was conducted through Irish, so I felt it would be more in keeping with the topic to leave it in the original language, and we'll translate as we go, if that's okay. So, gan na hill willa, as we say, off we go to Inis Meáin. So, Suladussi and Wood, out of interest, could I have a law of a suas for anyone in the room who has actually been to Inis Meáin? Hi! Okay, great. So, take a galorgui a will a guest leis an Ilan. Most of you will, well, lots of you will understand a lot about the island. But for those of you who don't, we'll give a little background to it. So, Inis Meáin is the middle island of the three Aran Islands off the coast of County Galway. We have Inis Meáin, which is the east island, Inis Meáin, the large one, then Inis Meáin, the middle island. It's all very simple. The population currently stands at around 140 people, so it's the least populated of the three Aran Islands, which certainly lends something to its character. It's quite known for knitwear, for farming traditionally, for fishing, although there's not a lot of fishing going on at the moment, and tourism too. But I mean, really, tourism and Inis Meáin, there isn't a whole lot of it, and a lot of what we'll talk about tonight is Inis Meáin's unique landscape and how that has affected its people, its culture, and everything like it. So we'll see a lot of it, and we'll talk about it now, but to give a quick anecdotal introduction, they talk about the tourist season in the Aran Islands, and they say generally on Inis Meáin in the high season, you'll get around 2,000 people a day off the boats onto the island. Onto Inis Meáin then, you have about 1,000 people, even though it's the smallest island. They're not able for it at all. There's no water for them. Dreadful stuff altogether. But we have our 2,000 on one, 1,000 on the other per day. And then the saying goes that on Inis Meáin, every day about 12 people get off the boat. And it's true, like, I've been there this summer and you'd be kind of seeing them with the clicker and Aran ferries, and it seems pretty correct to me. So it's quite remote, is Inis Meáin, and it's really beautiful. It's also known for Gaeilge for as long as anyone can remember, when people have been going to learn Irish. Like as you'll see downstairs, scholars took to the blaskets, and if they couldn't get to the blaskets, they went to Inis Meáin. So anyone who has been there maybe has seen what they call Tachsing now, or otherwise known as Ulscoil na Gaeilge, where you had people like Yeats, Pádraig Pearse. The best of the best went to Inis Meáin to learn their Gaeilge, and John Millington Synge, of course, is another very famous learner of Irish who came to Inis Meáin because it was considered to be the best Irish that was to be got, if you believe that. It's also famed these days, and something that's very close to my own heart, for flora and fauna. Flowers in the island are just beautiful, although they don't call them blóhanna actually, they call them the pauser, na pauser, it's their unique word for it. And it's, again, all tied in with the landscape. The fact that the island is so cut off from the rest of the world makes it a sanctuary for flora, fauna, folklore, everything. It's quite remote from the outside world, and it gets a great result. So, moving on. So a couple of quotes that reflect this. One from John Millington Synge, of course, the famous playwright who wrote Playboy of the Western World, which was actually inspired by Inis Meáin. Story for another day, we won't get into it, you can look it up yourselves. I have decided to move on to Inis Meáin, where Gaelic is more generally used and the life is perhaps the most primitive that is left in Europe. We'll see this theme coming up again and again. Then Muirish Macaneil in 1999. Time has passed, nothing has changed. Inis Meáin, the Middle Island, is in many ways the one whose social and economic structures show the greatest continuity with the past. I particularly like this bit. So this is from the Irish Times in 1973 when rural electrification was happening. 2 of the 3 Aran Islands are leaving the candle and paraffin age. In a few weeks, Inis Meáin, the smallest of the 3, will be switched on. And next year, Inis Meáin will follow. Inis Meáin apparently wants to live in the old way. At least the inhabitants so far have not done anything about amps and kilowatts. Again, the theme continues. A little bit resistant to change. So this is a short documentary. We're just going to look at maybe a minute or so of it. It was made by a man called Chris Rodmell in 1972, even though it went out in the BBC in 1975. He was a student studying journalism at the time, and he received a grant to create a documentary about a remote enclosed community. So the brief was something like maybe a prison. And he thought, what about an island off the coast of Ireland? So he came to Inis Meáin and made this video, which is actually a terrific example of life in the Aran Islands. Go and enjoy. So as I say, we'll just listen to a little bit.
The very first impression that one takes is the impression of a solid rock, perhaps something which has been standing there, resisting everything that the Atlantic could throw up at it. And I think it would be true to say that the people here have something of the same quality, that perhaps men may come and men may go, but that they and their island withstand, no matter what are the influences which may come in.
Well, we're living here in the rock, you may as well say. And on stormy nights, if anybody gets sick, you'll sure start to pray. Because the only transport we have here to the hospital in Galway in the mainland is the lifeboat. And if the sea's too rough, we cannot go to the lifeboat. I think we'll have to pray then. But the people have a strong religion here.
Now, it's a terrific little short film. I recommend you go home and watch it if you haven't seen it yourselves yet. So that's a really strong theme for what we'll discuss tonight. Obviously, we're looking at St Brigid's Day traditions, Tradiisiún na Brídeog, which of course are tied in with faith. And a part of the reason, and what we'll discuss a lot of tonight, is why traditions survive on Inis Meáin that fade away in other places. And a huge part of it, amongst other things, is the faith of the people here. And again, that faith was directly affected by the ferocity of the landscape around them. As we heard in the video there, on a stormy night, if you get sick, your only choice was to pray, because you couldn't even get into the lifeboat, you couldn't get to the hospital. Now, it's not like that anymore. You can get a helicopter. In fact, you're much better off on Inis Meáin having a heart attack than you are in Mullen or somewhere. But that faith has stayed with the people, and it is part of a reason that traditions like St Brigid's Day traditions live on here. I love this quote, you know, the second bit here. I think it would be true to say that the people here have something of the same quality, that men may come and men may go, but they and their island will stand no matter what the influences which may come in, like electricity in 1973 or other things. So my own connection with the island should probably be explained from Inniscorthy to Inis Meáin. It's not a trip that many people make. So I was very, very lucky to... I had one experience in the island when I was a journalist with TG Cahir. I was sent out. We're going to look at that first bit of work that brought me there. But the real reason I'm still on the island and that I'm here with you tonight is that I made the most terrific decision to do a master's in Béaloideas with University College Dublin. And as part of that, I was even luckier to receive the Donal O'Moran Scholarship, because Béaloideas tuigim gohfuil muintir Iwaráin an Sehannacht. And that scholarship or bursary allowed me to travel to Inis Meáin for 1 month in 2021 to conduct fieldwork collecting stories about the St Brigid's Day traditions. So I have to thank the family, I have to thank UCD, I have to thank St Brigid, because I moved to the island after it. I had such a great time that I'm still there. So thanks to all involved and to Bridget herself. So tonight we're going to look at some of the Tradiisiún na Brídeog which exist on Inis Meáin, which are a little different. Some traditions are similar to other parts. We can see here St Brigid's cross is, oh, it's a little blurry, my apologies. But in any case, there's a number of St Brigid's traditions all over the country. There is a variety of different traditions even on Inis Meáin, but tonight we're going to look at mostly the main three. So from left to right, we'll see an huge tradition in the Béaloideas na Brídeog. So Brídeog are periwinkles, and on Inis Meáin, the tradition on Lá na Bríde is to pick periwinkles and to have them for your dinner at night. We'll go into it more detail later, but you need na Brídeog. Then my favourite is the Brídeog, and it's a really, really special tradition. Again, we'll delve into it, but that's our effigy of the lovely, beautiful, colourful Brídeog in the middle here. And then we'll also take a quick look at the Crossoga Bríde, the St Brigid's crosses in the island. So, mar hosa cuasaí, I mentioned that I first went to Inis Meáin as a journalist to look at the Brídeog. Oh, look at this! Great. So, I did, as Ailish mentioned there, my undergrad in the University of Limerick, as part of which, my cursa Sahailga, we touched on a little bit of Béaloideas, and we had looked at Kevin Danaher's iconic The Year in Ireland. And I remember then when I was working as a journalist for Multigail TG Cahir, which is a digital platform for Gaeltacht communities, that, you know, we were trying to do things for the times of the year that people from the Gaeltacht would like. And I was like, what was that thing that they used to do that was in that book that I read sort of that time, the Brídeog? That sounded fabulous. And I took off to the canteen in TG Cahir, a wealth of information, and said, And dúirt cúpla duine liom, the Brídeog, you have to go to Inis Meáin. They love that out in Inis Meáin. So from my iver na maná seo, Inis Ní Thiarnaigh, nu Maureen Vainey, mar thugtar freisin, a very well-known woman, still going strong. She's full of shanachas. She's a wonderful lady, and she very kindly spent a day with me showing me how to make a Brídeog. So this video is in Irish, it's subtitled in Irish, but we'll kind of discuss it again afterwards, some of the main points. But really just to see what a Brídeog looks like, how a person might make one, and it's only about a minute long, we'll get a feel for it. It's a little quiet, but that's okay. It's just a quiet video. I didn't do a good job editing it.
Tá tradiisiún se in an stoiles na ciant. Ní bíd muine na gael a chutiara a gcónaí agus caniste gaitan Brídeog. An rud a tam lá amar dúirtú na dárnam tí. Badalin, gomorach a clegin bection in the spell, but nach shan tiach wat ni yari bishitsu ke bian clef in spell. Ruch met so well. Kom op met haar, cholle haar, sin ben bernard en vele DJ.
Oh, well, sin. So sinné Maureen agus an Brídeog. Great, sinné now, there's no more tricky bits. So, lovely video there. If I do say so myself, I just love looking at it now, I suppose, because I understand the background to it. And I think especially the way Maureen talks about the Brídeog, I mean, she's a great storyteller anyway, but you can see how emotive it is for the women of Inis Meáin, and again, we'll be delving into that. So just a couple of points to take away from it. So, Bridget in Noel, a hugti era goni. We're in Noel, of course, Mary of the Irish. It's a very strong title for Bríd that has a lot of significance. Tá tradiisiún seo Éireann stoi leis na cianta. This is something quite interesting about the Brídeog tradition. So things like, when the first St Brigid's cross was made, we have a lot of legends about that, and Bríd going out and saving the man and converting him to Christianity on his deathbed. There's nothing like that on Inis Meáin about how the Brídeog came about. People will just say, tá sé an leis na cianta, probably hundreds of years. It's on the island for as long as anyone can remember, which is interesting in itself. The Ribini, agus an gúna céanna bheith hart a golig an affrin de dúna. Ribini, loads of brightly coloured ribbons, necklaces. She has to be really bedazzled. We'll talk about this again later. And the best dress that would be in the house, what you would wear going to Mass on a Sunday, that's what goes on the Brídeog. And then the girl gets to wear her second best dress. So again, there's a couple of interesting things at play there. And then, Badalin go múlacha clicking bug sin a skull. We'd be dying for the bell to ring at school, that they'd be out the gap and going around with the Brídeog on Oíche Éil Bríde. So like a lot of traditions in Ireland, the Brídeogi were celebrated on the eve of St Brigid's Day, not on St Brigid's Day itself, so Oíche Éil Bríde. And in the olden days, now they get a half day from school, so it's even more excitement, but the girls used to have to wait for the bell to ring, and then they'd be straight home, get the Brídeog, and then going to every single house on the island to bring the Beannacht, the blessing of St Brigid. So that's the Brídeog. Now, as I mentioned, I'm here because of my thesis, which brought me to the island, and before I went out and had to decide what would I ask people, and I'm conducting my fieldwork, so I kind of based it on the literature which was available beforehand, and surprisingly there wasn't a whole lot, even though people knew about the Brídeogi on Inis Meáin and things like that. It hadn't actually been written down. So obviously I went to the Mecca for all things folklore and took off to the Béaloideas. And the Béaloideas Skull was really an excellent resource. There was 6 accounts in great detail about St Brigid's Day. We'll go through some of the most interesting motifs there. Then the Psí of Béaloideas, the main collection, and the Cartlin Fuima. So there was one interesting thing in the main collection, that was all. We'll look at it again in a second. And then other sources like that Chris Radmel video, Inis Meáin Another Day. That's really terrific if anyone again hasn't seen it, to look at and pick it apart. Bill Doyle's book, The Aran Islands, Another World, is amazing, really amazing. It's interesting, Bill Doyle came to the Aran Islands to make that book, and even though there's 3 Aran Islands, he ended up giving 2/3 of the book to Inis Meáin, the smallest of the 3. So there's a lot in there too. And then, of course, my own fieldwork from that time I spent with Multiscale. So before we go into the Béaloideas Skull, I kind of analysed it and looked at the main traits. So you see a lot about the Tús an Airg, the coming of spring. That's in almost all of the accounts. Weather, naturally, was a huge part of it. The Bjac Hira. So Bjac Hira is not a saint's feast day. It's a sort of a half day off for people on the island. There was someone described it to me as, you know, if you had to fix a fence, you would. Ach, ní bhearach ban gsha láv Sean Knittal and Lashin. A woman wouldn't even put her hand on a knitting needle that day, because that would be considered too much work. You know, you're supposed to rest on St Brigid's Day. And actually, the church on Inis Meáin has an interesting story. It used to stand on one side of the road, and then they knocked it down and they rebuilt it on the other side of the road, where it still is today. And it was rebuilt in 1938, and they started building it on the 2nd of February. In almost Gnev Bríd, because you couldn't start building on the Bjac Hira. Then, of course, the Brídeog and Béaloideas Ní Thiarnaigh come up again. So we don't have a huge amount of time, so we'll just look at some of the interesting lines that come up, and then we might see if they resurge again in 2021. So these, of course, are all collected by hand by school children on Inis Meáin in 1937 and 1938. So Teach an Airg Lála Bríde, tá sí na hain le shine agus a Jane an Yad. The birds are singing and making their nests. Being on Law Holland Sheene, the stretch comes in the evening. This is an interesting kind of a shan roiches. Nave Bríd said, Gach ra law lá sa amach. So again, we can see even that's changed over time. What it actually means is Gach dara law. So every second day for my day, there will be good weather. And then they say later on, St. Patrick came in and said, well, every day after my day will be better. And all of this kind of ummiocht between them. And bein na hún oige havre freshen. The lambs start to come in the fields. And by gan hurry in a gorgeous despair, the sun will be in the sky. By Cumann Tarig a tachter, and I'm sure it's all very happy in the coming back of spring, and that's very important. Then the Crossogue of Bríde. So, each of Bríde, if you heard in a crossog, people will be making the crossog, and it's la ra chipping aimed a jainter e. So this is probably the most interesting part of the crossog tradition on Inis Meáin, is that it would be made with these 2 little pieces of wood, as we can see in the bottom right here. And you see this on some of the other Aran Islands too, this idea of the Gá Chippín Aimid. It was a very simplistic version of the St Brigid's cross compared to what you'd see in other places. Now, they do have all sorts of St Brigid's crosses there now. It's come in from other places too. But that would be the traditional one. We'd see Le Á a Bheirita. It was thought to bring luck. You don't really hear stories of it protecting against fire or floods like you would in other places. Just Á a Bheirita, luck to be on the house. And that would be done on Ich Elfried Freshen. Béaloideas Ní Thiarnaigh, the periwinkles here, the black periwinkles, just in case anyone else is thinking of going out picking them for the dinner. Not the grey periwinkles, you can't eat them. They're called Fuiachan Capel, the horse periwinkles, non-edible. So being áhas gachtain a tógal Fuiachan agus Barney and Lashin. Everyone would be happy out collecting periwinkles, and they thought that if you brought the periwinkles into the house and had them for your dinner, that you could make isk farshing fenna bliana, that then you would have success in fishing later in the year. So this is a tradition that predominantly was associated with fishing families on the island, as we'll learn later. So we'll go on again. Then my personal favourite, on Brídeog. So being a Calini Bugga Gemachto Hachgatach, young girls, it's girls at primary school age. So as soon as you leave primary school, you're not allowed to do the Brídeog anymore. So again, that lends a lot of resonance to it. Women on the island, you'll see another quote that one of the women says, "O vi cuina at." From as long as you could remember, before you could even probably remember, you'd be that young, you'd be out in the roads expected to do the Brídeog. So Calini Yoga, they'd be dancing and singing a little song, and they would get an egg or a penny in every house after they brought the blessing to the house. We can see a lovely picture there too. Being the Cailíní Gemacht, St Brigid, they're class, like they're so fabulous and so colourful. And we'll get into that too, how important the colours are. And again, it's all the coming of spring and brightness and happiness, lots of things like that. So Héadlog Arach, Shani Féile Bríd, the girls going from house to house, but not a lot of detail because of course there wasn't really scope in the Béaloideas skull for it. But we see that it was there in almost every account. It was very important. The Cartlin Fuima. So from the Cartlin Fuima in the Cnúsach Béaloideas at the moment, there was only one account from Inis Meáin about St Brigid Day, and this was it. Láda Bríd, Fiach Brídeog Gemacht, the Brídeog will be going around. It's still there, Ervalach, this is 1978, the dance of the little girls, but I think that'll probably go too. Everything like that is on the way out, but it was nice. So it's still going on, no need to be so gruma about it in 1978. But it's interesting that this gentleman, when asked about Láda Bríd on the island, the Brídeog, it's the first thing that springs to people's mind. Nothing else was mentioned. This was all that was said about Láda Bríd. Then there's this very mysterious page, the only page I could find after a full day going through all the manuscripts. Even though there was a lot of folklore collected on Inis Meáin and the Aran Islands, I suppose a lot of it focused on Loganim, so place names, Pishoga, things like that, and also things like working on the sea, the traditional farming methods. That seemed to be the focus. And the only thing I could find, despite the great work that was done by Cumann and Brídeog agus Seosamh McOwen and a couple of other people, this page was the only thing I could find about the Brídeog or Láda Bríde, na Páistí. So Lá na Gapri, that's another child's tradition, and then Lá an Brídeog, blank. So, not a lot to work with, but also kind of encouraging, that I was going to go off and maybe fill a few pages myself. So then we come to kind of more recent times, and these photos from Bill Doyle, I just think they're the most amazing thing. How did he get there and just immediately understand exactly what was important about this tradition? So this picture on the left, I'm going to wax lyrical about later. But here on the right, I just think the symbolism, of the girls and the Brídeog between them, it's one Brídeog between two girls usually, and the way they're facing into the light and the shadow coming behind them, and that's, the whole idea. It's the coming of light, you're back to the darkness, the spring is here, and the colours and the joy and the youth of it all. I just think it's a splendid photo. And I would tell Bill Doyle myself only for, unfortunately, he's no longer with us, but his work is really terrific, and I was very, very lucky to have it to help me with my studies. So you can kind of understand in a way the lack of material collected on the topic because of how inaccessible the island was. We spoke already about the ferocity of the landscape. I mean, until the 1990s, there wasn't even a pier on Inis Meáin. They were still using the old Naomh, which was the ferry that had to come in, and then you had to go in Curragh the rest of the way, and even transporting cattle like that, it was crazy stuff. And even between the islands, because Inis Meáin is in the middle, the two sounds, as they're called, on either side are really perilous waters with extremely dangerous currents. So you'd imagine that the islanders would be hopping from one island to the other, and it just didn't really happen. And if you examine the Béaloideas skull records, for instance, for Inisir and Inishmore, you can see the accounts just don't match up. Each island had its own traditions. And again, it's all because of the landscape. But the reason maybe that the Brídeog weren't covered and Láda Bríde didn't receive a lot of attention was weather is really bad at the end of January. Even nowadays, when there's Éireann and Aran ferries, the boat often doesn't go for a couple of days at the time. So it makes sense. And actually, Chris Rodmell, who made the video we watched at the start, I found him on the internet and emailed him and was like, hi, I'm doing some research on Inis Meáin. Did you ever look into the Brídeog? And he said he was aware and had hoped to photograph the giving of the dolls. Unfortunately, never had an opportunity in February. Not easy to travel to the island. So that kind of supports that theory. Also, it was very nice of him to get back to me. Also, something that's widely regarded in folklore all over the world is a lack of collection of folklore, of women's folklore, especially ban Thiarnaigh. And this seems to definitely have been at play here too, because in Ireland traditionally all the full-time folklore collectors, of course, were male. And as we see here from Jordan and Callick, the gender of the folklore fieldworker influences what he or she looks for, and until recently most fieldworkers were male. So even in Ballycon na Scoil, the Múinteoir in Inis Meáin was a male teacher. Most of the teachers that helped out in Ballycon na Scoil were male. That had to have, naturally, probably a subconscious impact, but maybe it makes us have a little less information about female traditions. And also, you know, people on Inis Meáin, male or female, but specifically the women, if a man was coming in those times, they're very private people. And they're not going to be jumping out of their way to speak to someone and say, let me tell you about me and my Brídeog. You know, so if a direct question wasn't raised, it was something that maybe wouldn't come up. So it's an interesting point to consider. Now, this is a marvellous piece of audio. I lied, there is another link. So this archival programme was put together by Seamus O'Scanlan called Bridget na Noel, and it was aired last St Brigid's Day on Radio na Gaeltachta. And what had I missed in my research but the amazing resource that is the Radio na Gaeltachta archive. And at the very start of this, actually I had it there for something, is a little girl from Inis Meáin talking about the Brídeog. And it's just an absolutely terrific account. So I think it's from 2016. And as it happens, Grania, who is the little girl in this, she's not a little girl anymore, she was in 2016, was actually one of my interviewees. So she's in it on the double now.
Passionist, go fisa kainse e togiu in the Nishmaun and Norin, tot siglo take hop shot, the hobbies and the Quidit with that low shot, even Irish.
Smasher Granny Nella Axtmagal Inchach Cahuilish and Brídeog Gianna. From the Darnati Agus kindling to the couple of sub Agus from to Peace Aidach Bon Agus Kurantugam Aidana Agus and Shin couldn't find too much as Cho Agus couldn't to reach Darnan Tia Len Lava Éireann agus gléisan tú í agus taining tú an héadam agus chuann tú na cuid éadaíara agus an sin ceanglinn tú na ribíníara agus an cris agus chuann tú na bróitníara agus tein beirt cailíní timpeall agus tein mise Mahin Maharmarin agus Murar Cora Timple, the Brídeog. Time de Colahach and Éireann agus Gwyn Mudge, Banachtaí Nave Bridget Tach. Chris, Bridget, Medicine, Bridget Brat, Mascara, Tosh, the Loch, Masha, Dara, Reish, and Piano Nacht. Come on,
That's lovely. Just adorable. And it's the most comprehensive description of exactly what goes on the night of Brídeog. And of course, we get a lovely song at the end of it too, which, I don't know, do you know that song, Calamish Chutchafreed? It's a hymn and even like really encapsulates what it's about too, like Cron is blowing falls a reach, you know, the trees and the flowers growing again, we sing to you, St Brigid. Oh, it's a beautiful song, and that's the local primary school singing it. So, Grania, as she says here. So, of course, we hear about the Darnan tea, which we saw from Maureen Eachnidis. The Darnan tea is the straw that was gathered and made into a Darnan and then dressed with the Éidach Bon, the white sheet. Then you get the Maja. So the Maja is a stick, and it's funny. All the Inis Meáin people they'll say Maja cust brush, the stick of the leg of a brush. So Maja brush. And I was thinking, what is this Irish word? No, it's a brush. And then the brush goes through it, and you have the two little hands, and then you dress her up, and then you draw on the face, and then you put on her clothes. And even I think that's lovely. You put her clothes on her. It's not it, you know, it's a little she. And you put on the ribbons, agus a chrish, because of course the chrish is the traditional belt of Inis Meáin, so that's what the ribbini kind of were designed to be like, the very colourful chris. And broochini, loads of brooches, and two girls going together. She goes with her sister. And this thing again, you'll hear it again and again. Chulahach, Chuile hach bio. Every single house these little girls would visit. And Gwibin would, we pray, we give the blessing of Naomh Bríd. And what we didn't see in any of the Ballyconn Skull collections, which is interesting, is the Beanocht, which is what it's all about. Chris, Bríd and Chris. Could you hear there they were kind of dancing? So they do like a little hop where Callie Nawan, Callie Nella, and the Brídeog between them, 3 I should say, dancing together. The Brídeog is included, and they do like a kind of a hop forward, hop back. There's no steps or anything, or if there ever was, the steps have been lost. But they hop back and forth and say the prayer. Muire Samach. So Holy Mary and her son, Bríd is a brat, Bríd is a brat, Bríd and her brat Bríde, different tradition, no time for that today. And then Mos Fjord Hashe Benocht, Gumashach Fjord of Eshiv Blian Oenocht. So that's a really common motif you'll see in a lot of the traditions about St Brigid's Day all over the country, whether it's the Chris Bríd in Connemara, which is it's different, it's kind of a belt or a loop made of woven straw, different tradition again, or the Brat Bríde. You hear a lot of this, Mos Fjord Hashe Benocht, Gumashach Fjord of Eshiv Blian Oenocht. If you're well tonight, that you may be 7 times more well a year from tonight. So that was your blessing that would keep you safe until the next year. So my own fieldwork, as I mentioned, I was there for a month on Inis Meáin. I was very lucky. And I collected 20 interviews, 18 of which I conducted, and 2 which I was very lucky to get from a lovely lady on the island called Orla Vranoch, who she's just retired, was a teacher in the primary school, and just did marvellous work collecting folklore and putting the kids, sending them home for their homework. Kirkester the Wamo, Kirkester the Yado, and everything was collected, and they have piles of stuff in the school and scrapbooks, and it's marvellous. And Orla had done 2 interviews herself with her mother-in-law, who had passed away since, but she would be 102 or 103, and with her husband as well. So they were now incorporated, and they've been given into the folklore collection too. So 7 men and 13 women. When I went first, I was looking at all the traditions. I didn't know was I going to focus just on the Brídeog. I said, I'll get it all, and then I'll see what jumps out. And towards the end, I kind of felt the Brídeog was jumping out, and so I should speak to more women. So that's why it's a little bit Cleonta. And then a difference of age groups from their youngest was 23, and then would be 101. And then, as I said, my questions were kind of based around the motif scene in Ballyconn Skull and others. So I mightn't go through all these slides because time is ticking, but we'll look at some of the most interesting themes and some new themes that came from my own research. So we divvied them up, and straight away out of my 20 things we can see that 19 of my interviews talked about the Brídeog. Next most strong was the Crossoga, the crosses, then the periwinkles, then the beginning of spring, and then some others, which we will get into. But those are our main ones. So Tuasanáraigh, again, is still hugely important. The beginning of spring, and I love the start of it. It was inspired the title of this talk tonight. Naomh Bríd Ban Rian an Ari. Naomh Ban Rian an Ari a Hugti Urcha. She's Hugasteach an Tarach an César. She was the queen of the spring, St Brigid. This is from Ciarán Bhéinigh. Ciarán Bhéinigh is actually the brother of MoLI Aedín Ní Thiarnaigh, who we saw making the Darnan, and is full of stories in Shanachas, and he's excellent really, especially for things like that to do with farming and the kind of male traditions. So he had stories like that, more to do with the land. So that was very interesting. And then Dóchas, so the idea of hope coming with the start of spring. So it was the start of spring and things were growing again, and I suppose it was a type of time that gave people courage and raised people's hearts. And when you're young, you don't understand that so much, but now that I'm older, I understand the darkness of winter, and everyone is looking forward to the spring again, the days getting longer. It was a great raise for the heart. And then again, after the dark winter, somewhere as remote as Inis Meáin, that it really is a bigger deal to the people, something like a festival, like Lála Bríde. And again, we have some of the Shanroitis, so we see our old friend, Gach Ein Dara Lá Malas Amach, lived on till 2006. And then this one is lovely as well. O Lá Bríde Amach, bín na héine Jane and Yad, bín na cuire brehanuan, agus bín na hoon a dul in yart. A few people had that, which is a lovely phrase. So from St Brigid's Day, the birds are making the nests, the sheep are having their lambs, and the lambs are getting stronger by the day. So it's a lovely one as well. Then we have our Crossoga. So this is quite interesting. it used to be traditionally men who would make the crosses. That was something that hadn't come up before. Even though the Cippín Aimid, let's say the old wooden cross, kind of curious because there are no trees in Inis Meáin because the wind is atrocious, so they don't grow. So things like that, finding pieces of wood, it was hard to come across. Then you would make the cross and stick it up into the rafters. And then similarly to other places, you could guess the age of houses by the amount of crosses up in the rafters. What was interesting as I went around asking about the crosses was that compared to any of the other traditions, there was such variety. You think in one island with a teeny weeny population, they'd have one cross and they'd be grand, you know? But as we see here, Maggie Ihona, so this is the lady who would be 102 now, but has since passed away. Her is so cute listening to this interview because it's her little granddaughter asking her the questions. And she said, not at all. I didn't know what a cross breed was until I saw, a St Brigid's cross was until I saw Breed Lynch's family doing it. So there was a family on the island who were completely unaware that something like that existed. You know, they just didn't have it in the houses because, again, I should have said this maybe earlier, because of the terrible weather, there was no priest on Inis Meáin a lot of the time. So the people were very independent in their faith. They would have said the rosary, they would have had special prayers for getting up in the morning, having your breakfast, lighting the fire, cleaning the fire, washing your teeth, everything. You know, kind of faith was in the home. And so the St. Brigid's cross was also in the home, and that left room for more variety. So from one family who had no cross to this family on the other side of the island who had two different types of crosses. So here we had only one mention of an Chrosog Three-Chrosach, so that's the three-legged St. Brigid's cross, which she said was for animals, and that was specific to go up in the crow, so where the animals would stay, that would be the three-legged St. Brigid's cross, and then the four-legged cross was for people, and that she got that story from her father, who was from the west of Inis Meáin. And the people really believed in the ability of the cross to heal animals who were sick. So that was really interesting, hadn't popped up anywhere before. What else is quite new is that now it's changed completely. So the cross now is made in school, like it is in so many places across the country, and it has been quite standardised to what they call, and what we see no doubt a lot of the time is the RTE cross, as they call it, the four-legged cross. And they have a special mass, and all the crosses are blessed and then brought home, and people say that's where the power comes from, even though this is only brought in the last 10 years. So it's interesting how people's mindset has changed around the Chrosog Brídeog. So these quotes again are just saying that it was never made in the school before, but now the tradition is that it's made in the school. So this Chrosog Aimid, I was mad to find one when I went out because of course everything in the Ballychun school was telling me, go Cippín Aimid, go Cippín Aimid. And everywhere I went, I'd be saying, do you have a St. Brigid's cross? And it was, do you want one out of rushes? No, go Cippín Aimid. Out of straw, is it? No, go Cippín Aimid. Slot the Sally. No. Anything to be said for two little crosses. And I wasn't getting anywhere. Couldn't find one because, of course, they had all been in the thatched houses. And the thatch isn't really on the island anymore, and anything that had been thatched was thatched new. And there was none of these crosses to be found. I was quite disheartened until I paid a visit to my neighbour, Padder Moore, O'Keneela. And I popped into him, and like this, I was talking to him and saying, you know, Aberdeen Fine cross over, and he actually made all the other crosses. These ones here, he makes the crosses now. So this one here will be called a Sumul Day, so God's eye, and that's made out of willow. And then this is the traditional one, also made out of willow, and then this beauty here is what we're coming to. So I said, are you sure now? Will you keen to Curbe Shin a Chrosog? Inis Meáin. He said, yeah, that's the one. And I said, are you sure there wasn't another one? He said, no, should they a Chrosog, should they a Chroshin? And I said, are you sure there wasn't one? Don't just go Cippín Aimid. And I went like this, you know, my head says, oh, sure isn't the shed out the back full of them? So then he took off going out the shed anyways here, and you can see it's absolutely fallen to bits. And we got in and looked up, and the whole roof was covered in these wee little grasses. You know, I've been looking the whole time. Oh my God, it was elation. I was so excited. And then it was complete panic because he was like, do you want one? I said, no, leave them where they are. I'll take a picture. He said, sure, there's so many of them. And he reached up and he grabbed one and he dragged it out of the wall and gave it to me. So that's why I have it in there in my hand. And it had been up in the rafters so long that when he pulled it out, the nail actually rotted, just went to dust. I thought, oh my God, history is ruined. But in any case, we got a nice close-up then. So he had made all of these little crosses. And I said to him, where did you get the wood for it? Because there wasn't any trees growing on the island. And what he says here, in the Aedín Ní Thiarnaigh, jawa, era gladach iad. So you'd be looking out for little bits of Imid Raka, and it would be kept, and he'd whittle them down and make the little cross. And as he says here, vi an ted sin lawn hope. The shed would be full of them. Every house, again, this chulahach bio. Every house would be coming down with them. You had to put up a cross on Iche Éireann sheet. So that was a big, big excitement part of my fieldwork, if not the most exciting part. Now, the fuiachan. So the fuiachan, as we say, there isn't any massive tradition with them, except this idea that on Lála Brídeog, you would go out, collect them, bring them home, boil them, fry them up, have them for your supper, and they were lovely. That was it. In some places, you see a lot of things about you'd bring in the iasc bio, they call it, the live fish, and scatter to the four corners of the house, and that would ensure your fishing luck for the year. And I had read it so many times that I said it to people, would you put the periwinkles in the four corners of the house by any chance? And they looked at me, every single one of them, like I had 4 heads. They were like, Tigga? Why would you do that, And that's a big part of it, I suppose, in Inis Meáin. Like, they're not going to do anything that doesn't make sense. Why would you put perfectly good food, in the 4 corners of the house? No, you eat the periwinkles. Nach digging through. But you could jazz. So again, these are all different ways of just describing how to cook them up, and you eat them with a little safety pin. And again, we see here, sin an táma just och na híscarí fad na gurrachaí, gymach canal luck. So the fishing would start up again. It was a lucky thing to do to kind of celebrate the first fresh bit of fish in the year. Another thing that's quite significant is that longer ago, they would have been relying on Brídeog, so barnacles, shall we say, as the first bait. And then the second bait, or the proper bait that would come in that was any good, was the fuiachan. So when the fuiachan came back, that would be your first bit of bait. Then you'd catch a little fish. Then you'd be able to use that to catch a bigger fish, and the whole cycle started again. So getting your first periwinkle was actually reason for celebration and a tasty supper with flour and potatoes. So then the Brídeog. So the Brídeog, the way I did all transcriptions for all of my interviews. It took me a very long time, and I kind of divvied them up into the different themes. And then I had to make a whole new spreadsheet for the Brídeog because there was so much going on, and I just loved it, every part of it. But one of the things that always comes up, the most important thing, is on Fáidir, on Bhainacht. The blessing is at the centre, the heart of everything. So this is just going through it again. And then Shinny a Fáidir, Tainti ó Gluin, go Gluin. This is the blessing. It goes from generation to generation, and I love this line. Bhí sé sin ar bhéal chula chalín beag a fásús ar an Ileán. That was on the mouth of every little girl growing up on the island, and it still is. And it's just, I suppose I can hear these ladies in my head saying it and the way they say it and how much it means to them and the pride that goes with it as well. So I guess it means a little more. Also, this is Grania, who we would have heard on RadioMoLI. And I'm not so sure she'd be very impressed if she knew I was pointing her out. In any case, so this is another description of something that's really important. It's the colour and the bling of the Brídeog. So I'm not sure if you've ever seen pictures of Brídeogs in other places. Even if you ever see a photo of a Brídeog in Inis Meáin, it's not as big a tradition there, but they do have them. And they're white. White as anything, top to bottom, not a speck of colour. And there's other rhymes like, and the Brídeog dressed in white, all this stuff. No. Big no-no in Inis Meáin. It's how much colour can we get on this? So we have Brídeog Meáin an data. Brídeog bling a bhí an official title. So we'd have a brooch, and the brooch was important because women on the island traditionally would wear a brooch. In those days, similarly, the little girls wore ribbons. So the Brídeog wore ribbons, and the best dress that she have again will be on the Brídeog, and that she would be happy looking and tarintach, mealtach, that she would kind of bring joy, that she would be good looking. And I mean, like, look at all of the stuff where they'd be collecting it the whole year around. They'd say meall necklaces agus pearls, a heap of necklaces. One necklace would not do, as many as you could get on her as possible. So a reached on vanach that fader, vi sha fear hochtach, especially for the older people. The older people would give a little kiss to the Brídeog, and they'd rub themselves off the Brídeog, and they'd rub the ribini, and they believed that St Brigid would then protect the whole house. So this is a beautiful, really beautiful photo, and we can see this is a lady in the traditional dress of the island, just giving the Brídeog a little rub, and just the sincerity of it, you know, it was really believed. It's so different to something like, even though the girls, I should say as well, we mentioned that they arrived, they say the blessing, and they used to get, long ago, an egg, maybe a few eggs, or a pingan. Now they get lots of pinganee. So they do get quite a bit of money out of it. Now it's a fair industry because there's so few girls going around with the Brídeog, but you couldn't compare it to something like trick-or-treating, because they're not just going looking for something. It's seen that the girls and the Brídeog, they are bringing the most important thing to the house. And as well, the people then kind of thought, because Naib Bríd would give to the poor, by showing that you would give something, you would be, by being generous, you would bring generosity back on yourself. There's all levels of that going on behind it too. So, they'd be waiting for you. The door would be open. People loved it because you were bringing them Bríd's blessing. So that, I don't think I understood at the time, this idea of the door would be open. Like I mentioned before, traditionally and still today, Inis Meáin, they're very private people. So it's not like in your local estate where people be popping in and out to each other in the back doors. People are quite private. You might live beside someone for 20 years and never be in their kitchen, you know? So this idea of the girls with the Brídeog having ceadasteach into every house and the door would be open for them, it was like really unusual, and I suppose brought a kind of another special element to kind of like a time out of time. This was an unusual happening, the magic of the Brídeog, shall we say. And then this is just loads of ways of saying they all had a great time. So we re-rob went let, it was loads of crack, it was very special, adventure a bhí, you know, and getting the bit of money and having the day off of school, and the fact that it was just for the girls, you know, that made it a little bit more special for the Cailíní too. And again, similar thing. Another part of it that's quite interesting is, even though it's such fun, there's quite a responsibility on the young girls of Inis Meáin to go around with the Brídeog, because especially of the Laidiús, the Dainra, the decline in the population. There are so few girls now on the island, which means there are so few Brídeogi, and the very real possibility that maybe there won't be any. So, chuilechach beag is má chail tú teach, a hoch tú rash, níadtá dinne a chaile. If you missed a house, it's worse than anything. You know, it's a real, the girls from a very young age understand that it's their responsibility, that it's more than them, what they're doing. It's to bring this banacht, oh hach gahach. It's like a noble quest, almost, you know, it's bigger than anything. So, Bríd ní raibh aon seans go mbeadh na daoine imi as the teach. And that's so true. Like, I'm supposed to be teaching an Irish class in the island next Tuesday, which is going to be Bríd. I'm like, well, we have to cancel it, because people won't like to be out of the house for an hour in case the girls come at that time, and then they'd miss the Brídeogi. It's, you know, you'd miss the blessing, and it's quite serious. And even the girls sing here, so, wind or gales wouldn't stop us from going to every house on the island. You know, they really do take it seriously. It's very special. So that's, again, it's similar, just talking about how low the population is. If someone wasn't in and they missed you, they'd be really upset. And in a way, we feel a little pressure on that day, that you really have to get to every house. And this little girl, she was only 4.5, and on her second house, she twisted her ankle, and her poor mother had to carry her to each house because she couldn't go home without doing them all, Mammy. You know, people would be disappointed. So even from a young age, they understand their noble duty to bring Beannacht, Bríd, ó Hach Gatach. So changes over the years, I suppose. This Gráinne Ichníla, shall we say, Gráinne Ní Thiarnaigh, I've been talking about Gráinne a lot. She's only 24 now, but when she was going with Brídeog, she would have been walking from every single house. So that was around 2009, 2010, not that long ago. And it could take them 7 or 8 hours. And the people who've been to Inis Meáin take a shiv full of hills. You'd be wrecked, like, especially if you had little legs and you're carrying this Brídeog the same size as you. So they're not as tough now, they get a lift. And you can see them there piled into the back, and the colours and the excitement of it all is still there. And as I mentioned, the value of the couple of pingan has increased significantly too. So Téimiela a Hánig Conceen, 2 other things that came up. One was again this idea of Muire na Noel. And I should say before I was going out to, one thing that was kind of Agdona Garabahum, shall we say, it was on my mind was like, but why? Why do the people in Inis Meáin have this connection with Naomh Bríd? Because there isn't like, how many Tubber Bríde are all around the country. There's a St Brigid well everywhere. None to be had in Inis Meáin. So I was like, okay, it's not that. And there's no story to say she ever visited the island or anything. So I was like, but why? She's big everywhere, but why Inis Meáin? So I was curious to find out. And it seems to be this idea of Muire na Noel. They have loads of stories about it on the island. Well, a few stories. So the Bríd ceapaí bheith an mhór le Muire. This is a legend on the island that Bríd and Holy Mary were BFFs. And that they were best friends, bí an cara is mú a bhí ag maidin Muire. And while Holy Mary was in heaven, Naomh Bríd was her girl on the ground. And they were thick as thieves. And that's why she was given the title, Muire na Noel. Muire na Noel Naomh Bríd, she was in second place after Holy Mary. She was a sort of go-between. I love this. She had a direct line to God. And also at the bottom here we can see, that she an lárnach sail chuile Éireannach, and because she was Irish, she understood the life of an Irish girl growing up in Ireland, and also she had the direct contact to God, so people could just connect with her, especially women, on a different level, and these extra stories in Inis Meáin added to that. And then we cracked it, because I heard all about the Ilaracht to die Bríde Agúnta an Chlór. So there is no Tubber Bríde on the Aran Islands, but they all used to row over to County Clare, to Liscannor. Fabulous place, one of the most visited St Brigid's wells in the entire country, and I popped down because I had to see what all the fuss was about. And I couldn't believe it, because as you'll see on the sign there, in the first 3 lines, St Brigid's well, Liscannor, we'll see here, the Aran Islanders had a deep attachment to this place. So no mention of the local people. This was a well that the Aran Islanders made a special pilgrimage to. And that came up an awful lot, that there used to be a yearly trip to what was called Daibh Bríde Agúnta an Chlór. In more recent years, they would get a special ferry from Doolin Ferries, would cut them a deal, and they'd all go over and have a whale of a time. But before that, people would actually row over in the curraghs to Liscannor. So it's going on a long time. There was a lot of stories about, as we see here, Droch Fluer, Hine Nupáiste Teen, a sick child. Maybe someone would do a trip in honour of the sick child, and then when they were cured, not if, then the child would have to go and do their own pilgrimage and say thank you and take a bit of water and so on. And I love this too. Bhí Daibh Bríde ar nús stoi an Mecca going to Inis Meáin. And then bhíoch meall buidéilishka. I love this word, meall. I never heard it before in Inis Meáin. It means like heaps, loads. Bhíoch meall buidéilishka, cuishgrel. Loads of bottles of holy water. You'd think the well was empty after they came home. So, Daibh Bríde, cracked it. Now, Cain Fall, Gwilym Brídeog Holdáidir Fós, because even more so than the other traditions, which are still talked about, the Brídeog is what really gets people excited. And there's a couple of reasons that I deduced in my thesis for why she exists and why she has been more successful than others. So, Chéadrod ná stoi gur symbol dóchis atá inte. She's a symbol of hope. And as I mentioned again, just this absolutely cruel landscape that even in this day and age with all our electricity and home comforts, winter on an island off the coast of Ireland is harder than in other places. And so when the spring comes, it means more. And especially something that's so unique and so special to the islanders in their own community, and so full of joy and excitement and so unusual, you know, the little girls themselves being, it's just infectious, you know. So that's part of the reason why it would be more strong than in other places. And then also, the Brídeog is a symbol of growing up as a girl on Inis Meáin, and this came up again and again. There's a lovely phrase about it we'll look at now in a moment, and it's the heritage and the identity of being a woman from Inis Meáin that really stays with the women who grow up there, and of course they then are in charge of passing it to the next generation. So actually, even though it seems to have been a blip in the literature because it maybe could have been forgotten because of Banchánachas, it was the fact that it was Fui Chúram the man, because the women were passing it to each other, that it stayed and that it stuck, possibly. What do I know? And then the last thing is called what I would call role in the Himmerhess, so the play element, the fun associated with it. So a couple of more quotes here. So Béaloideas in Argay was the start of spring. Things were growing, like we said. We saw this at the start too, just to see it again. People's hearts were raised about the Brídeog. And then at the end here too, we see the ribbons and the colours. They were all associated with the beginning of a new era, the kind of Aviochen, you know, a new start and growth again, especially for people, farmers, after a long winter. Then the Féinúlacht, I love this as well. Ní léon chalín beag as Inis Meáin is cuma cé áit a bhfuil siad an domhan agus iad fásta nach gcuiníonn an ócáid speisialta sin agus is dóigh go muid bródú bhealach go bhfuil a tradiisiún beo. Is pórtaí an féinúlacht sin a muineann le bheithe a chalín as Inis Meáin agus do chuid a dhéanamh. So no matter where a girl from Inis Meáin goes and she grows up all over the world, she'll never forget that special occasion and the pride that the tradition is still going. It's part of the identity from being a girl in Inis Meáin and doing your part. Isn't that marvellous? You know, it really drives it home. Now, Maureen, she's an excellent speaker as well, but she gets really worked up about the Brídeog, and who wouldn't? Just really, really special. And it should be said too that there's a bit of it that for the girls in Inis Meáin, they used to have a secondary school on the island. So when girls left primary school and left the Brídeog behind them, they often left the island. They had to go to secondary school maybe in Spiddle. So the Brídeog really is such a symbol of their youth and their time on the island, because often they went to secondary school and never came back. They might go and do study somewhere else, they might get married, they might settle somewhere else, and they would never live full time again on the island, apart from the days of their youth, which were so wrapped up in the Brídeog. Then the last bit, this idea of ag immert Brídeog really stood out to me, because I would have thought, you know, ag imacht leis an Brídeog, going with the Brídeog, but the women would say again and again and again, and it was coming off the transcripts, ag immert Brídeog, so playing Brídeogs, which is a funny way to say, you know, bringing a blessing from house to house. And there's this theory, which my excellent advisor, Tiber Falsett, directed me to, about play element in culture and society, and I have a few quotes from it here. So about ritual. Ritual is seriousness at its highest and holiest, but can it still be play? We begin by saying that all play, both of children and of grown-ups, can be performed in the most perfect seriousness. At the great seasonal festivals, the community celebrates the grand happenings in the life of nature by staging sacred performances which repeat the change of seasons. Ringing a lot of bells? I think so. I love this bit too. So the participants in the rite are convinced that the action actualises and affects a definite beautification, brings about an order of things higher than that in which they customarily live. But with the end of the play, its effect is not lost. Rather, it continues to shed its radiance on the ordinary world outside until the sacred play season comes around again. And I couldn't believe it, you know, it's just bang on the nail. It's play, it's fun, it's wild, it's something so out of the ordinary, and everything is topsy-turvy. All of a sudden, little girls who might normally be at the bottom of the food chain are king of the island for the day. You know, the excitement and the magic and the out of the ordinariness of all of that really, really adds to the occasion, even though it's such a big task. And again, normally you would only give a menial task to a girl of primary school age, and all of a sudden, she's got the most important job in the whole island, bringing a sacred blessing from house to house. And like that, they're buzzing to get their few pennies, they're buzzing to get their pockets filled with sweets, but they know that they can't miss a house because people will be disappointed. They understand the sacred importance of it. And then a play community generally tends to become permanent even after the game is over. The feeling of being apart together in an exceptional situation, of sharing something important, of mutually withdrawing from the rest of the world and rejecting the usual norms retains its magic beyond the duration of the individual game. So that would explain why the Brídeog is still going strong in Inis Meáin. They're all talking about it already. The little girls are practicing. It's a big excitement, you know, for how many years, as long as anyone can remember. And really, when you look at it in its context and how much it means to people, it's no wonder that it still exists there, when in other places it has died away. So I just want to look at this picture again, because before I had read that theory, I was like in the bed at night, you know, and I was thinking like, what is it, you know, why does she mean so much to people here? And then I thought, it's because Bridget is their best friend, you know, from when they're so young. And I look at this picture, and if you just imagine, like the Brídeog, she's made from materials grown on the island. Everything she wore traditionally would have probably been made by a woman from the island, filled with straw grown on the island, put together, wearing their own dresses, so she looks like a little girl from Inis Meáin. She's wearing their clothes, she styles her hair and ribbons the same way. I mean, they used to be massive as well, the Brídeog, so they could actually be the same size as a little girl from Inis Meáin. And so rather than, I suppose, the first contact that a lot of people would have with St Brigid would be maybe in school, or you hear a legend and she's this otherworldly, magic, big figure, you know, to be revered, whereas in Inis Meáin, she's their pal, you know, and they're going around having this magical time together once a year. Of course, that first reaction and that first connection with her would stay with people through their lives. And I just think this picture, don't they look as if like they're three best friends walking down the road, or like she's their little sister going with them through life? I don't know, maybe I'm looking too much into it, but I just think it's amazing, absolutely amazing. So Gorgeous Fad Seal, it's a lifelong friendship as opposed to anything else, in my opinion. So Tauchi na Dradasún, just to wrap things up, they seem to be, as we see looking at the Brídeog, very strong. The only problem is, and it's a problem everywhere and in all the islands in Ireland, I suppose, is the reducing population. We're all affected by the housing crisis. If people can't get a house to live in, they can't move there, raise their children. There won't be any new generation to carry on and things like that, and that is a problem. And we see that coming up in parts of the interview. So go on here again, what it said, 2050 could be like the Blaskets, you know, but at the end of the day, it's young people that will keep things going, and people need to come home to the islands, in her opinion. But again, I mean, housing is just dreadful. For instance, 28% of the houses on Inis Meáin, 38 houses are empty. No deeds to be found, owned by someone in America, won't be rented, falling to pieces. Same story all over the country, you know, and 34% of the population as well is over 65 years. So it's an ageing population, it's a serious problem, but the belief is still there. And you can see that as well when you talk to people. So things are changed a lot. Ní cheaping go nimóch nós na Brídeogaí, ní cheaping a ads tá cailí ní buga sa náit. I wouldn't think now that this tradition will ever go. As long as there's girls on the island, the Brídeogaí will live on. Oh, Shasa Shea Goni. Oh, it will. It will last forever. This tradition will be here forever, as long as there's people on the island. Then it's part of our heritage, it's part of our tradition, and we take it with us no matter where we go. Oh my God, so just really, it's really special. Even though some of the traditions are going, I hope not. I hope that this tradition and our traditions about Naomh Bríd will never leave us. And they really don't seem to be on the way out at all. It's such an important time on the island, and it's just wonderful to have been able to learn so much about it and to see it all happening, and hopefully to watch it for another few years. So, Gur míle maith agaibh, bhí sé go hálan a bheith an bhór dearnta.